Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Yeah, I'm supposed to think of you as all naked. I'm not sure I really want to do that, but that's what I've been told to do. Thank you for coming along. It's a great opportunity for me to talk about something that I've really enjoyed doing. A little bit of context to start off with. I'm not a sky god. I don't have thousands and thousands of jumps. I'm as happy jumping out of an aircraft and just going down on my own as I am jumping with other people. I'm not a medical expert, so we're going to talk about hypoxia, decompressed sickness. I'm not a medical expert, and I'm not some cool hotshot Halo instructor. Scott, are you in the room anywhere? Scott, yeah. So I'm not a Halo instructor either, but I am just going to be a regular jumper and tell you of a sort of an experience or a couple of experiences I've had in jumping from high altitude, which I've been lucky to be able to have the opportunity for. What I'm also going to do is there's been a few presentations over the years here. 2016, Dr. Ryan Jackson and Ted Atkins presented on Halo Everest jumps. In 2021, I think Dr. John Carter presented on hypoxia. And in 2022, Scott Beach presented on high altitude jumps, decompression in the military and sort of hypoxia concerns, and shared some interesting experiences in terms of what can actually happen if we don't sort of prepare properly. My context also is this picture here. I just want to see a show of hands. How many of you have been at high altitude in a normal jetliner and thought, what would it be like to jump out of this height? Yeah, you're all like me. You're all like me, which is brilliant. So I really wanted to do that. So what I found myself, 1st of July, 2023, I was in a world of an extreme sort of conditions. And what do I mean by world of extreme conditions? Well, flight level 410, 41,000 feet. Extreme cold, talk more about this in a moment. Jetliners getting in the way of your parachute operation. Oxygen waterboarding. Corn sweat. Two things I'll talk about in a moment. And also, if things don't go right, only seconds of time of useful consciousness or effective performance time. So before I go on to that, I would like to talk to you about where did I start. If you're in the last presentation, you'll see that Dane was talking about he jumped out of a rapide, and I've started back in 1984. My inspiration for jumping was watching the Red Devils do a jump when I was 5 years old, Sunbury-on-Thames into an arena, and from that point on, I always wanted to do it. And when I was mobile enough to do this on my own, at the age of 19, I did a jump out of a Britain-Norman Islander from 2,000 feet on a static line. And probably like most of you, it's 3 seconds going from your most scared you're ever going to be in your life to the most exhilarated in just 3 seconds. So I followed a static line progression system where you went through dummy pools and you had a reserve in front of you, and you went through dummy pools, and then you went on to your first free fall, and they were all round canopies, GQ22 and then Air Chronicle. And we were ahead of the time because our reserve parachute actually had an automatic opening device. It was one of the rare ones that actually had one. We didn't have them in those days. So basically a different era back in the 80s. Your progression system was slightly different than it is today. 200 jumps to get the D license. And I did that, and I was doing that for a number of years and sort of moved from jump zone to drop zone to drop zone, from Blackbush to Thruxton to Bear Regis, then down into Dunkerswell, which is where I've really sort of carried on sort of jumping. We had limited disciplines then. Accuracy, canopy formation, FS, and something called style. Anyone heard of style before? Some of you. So 360, back loop, and then do the same thing again. And then you were judged on how quick and how precise you would do that. And then, I then had a hiatus, got to 30, career, family, married, and skydiving fell off. But I still kept on looking up at the sky, and you still keep on thinking, yeah, what would it be like to skydive today? And then when I came to 50, asked my wife, Jackie, and she said, I said, I want to go back to skydiving. Kids have gone, and she said, yeah, okay. Is your life insurance all right? So I checked with the life insurance, but yeah, that's okay. So I rang up Andy Guest at Dunkerswell, went down, and the first thing he said to me was, you're getting divorced, are you? I went, no, not really. He said, well, most people turn up on a motorbike having just got divorced and wanted to carry on skydiving. Well, I wasn't one of those. And I came back and I did an AFF level 5, a level 3, Jason Farron and Pete, and then I did a AFF level 5 with Jason Snalem, consolidation jumps, and got back into it. Did my FS1, did a TR1, and then started to think, you know what, there's another inspiration I've always had and that I like to do, and that's a high altitude jump. So let's have a look at that. So halo, high altitude, forget the low opening. We tend not to try and open low, we tend to open higher. Bit of history, I mean, I think it goes back to the 1800s. There were scientists that went up in balloons and experienced the high altitude environment where they did suffer from hypoxia because of lack of oxygen. And then we've got the military jumpers, and we're probably familiar with all of that. We're probably familiar with the Hollywood exploitation of the halo jumps and people like Tom Cruise doing jumps at Mission Impossible. But there's always been very little civilian opportunity for us to actually do high altitude jumps. So my inspiration was this guy here, and I don't know, some of you older people in the audience might know, this is John Noakes. He used to be a presenter on a program called Blue Peter, children's program. I think back in the 70s, he did a series of jumps with the RAF Falcons, which finalized with a jump with him doing from 25,000 feet with oxygen. And that was my inspiration. I wanted to do it. What attracts me? Well, it's the technical aspects. It's the equipment. I'm an engineer by trade, and sort of having the extra equipment and all that sort of stuff is something that interests me, as well as the discipline and the procedure that we have to sort of follow when we're doing this sort of jumping. Obviously, the high altitude is the other attractiveness as well for me. What is high? So that's another question. What do we mean by what is high? USPA has definitions in its skydiving manual, which says that low altitude is below 15,000. Intermediate is 15 to 20. High altitude is 20 to 40, and extreme altitude is above 40,000 feet. At 49,000 feet or thereabouts, your body or your lungs have a problem with excreting carbon dioxide. So it doesn't matter how much oxygen you get, you need to be in some sort of pressurized environment for it to work for you. At 62,000 feet, known as the Armstrong limit, your bodily fluids will start to boil away. I was going to be making a jump at 41,000 feet, so it's in this extreme issue. Now, apart from even the environment and the conditions, one of the biggest obstacles we have is how do we get up and therefore safely get out of an aircraft at that altitude. Airbus A380, 43,000 feet, Cini. Airbus H125 helicopter used in Everest rescues, 23,000 feet ceiling. So actually finding the vehicle or the aircraft that's going to get you to that altitude, you being able to leave it safely, is one of the more difficult parts. And we must also recognise the sort of three highest jumps that have ever been done. I know the last two are fairly recent, but for me, the most incredible jump at a high altitude is Captain Joseph Kissinger, who did 102,000 feet back in the 60s, when a lot of the knowledge that we have today just wasn't around or was being formulated. So I have a project. Does anyone know what a project is? How do we describe a project? Anyone want to tell me what a project is? Right, it's my business, so I'm going to bore you now with a bit of science. So it's a temporary endeavour that we're going to do to achieve a unique result or product or service, and we're going to have to balance a timeline against the result that we want and some sort of cost, whether it's pounds or whether it's effort. And we also have to balance uncertainty because it's unique. And what we want to do is make sure that we get the right quality of that result or that experience. So in my case, it's going to be a quality sort of experience from 41,000 feet. But we really need to also think about the risk perspective is, actually, if we get risk wrong or we don't mitigate it well enough in our sport, then it can have, sort of very, very drastic consequences. So we're balancing those things. A project can be a training event, a competition. This symposium is a project. The Red Devils pentagram sort of formation is a project. And what we're doing is we're investing time and effort so that we actually minimise risk and we maximise the sort of experience that we're going to get. The military have a term called the 7 Ps. Anyone know that?
Planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance.
I wasn't actually going to use the 7th one and just say the 6th, but thank you very much. That's exactly what it is. Proper planning, preparation prevents poor performance. So, research, thinking about what options do I have? And I spent quite a bit of time looking at this. I did actually go and speak to some contractors in the States to see if I could do some high altitude jumps there. That was a big no-no, but I thought I'd try. There were obviously shared experiences and stories and projects around big waves. So if you just Dane's presentation, they normally get more altitude. I'm not a good skydiver. I'm not in any way good enough to actually do some of those big waves. So I wasn't going to get to higher altitudes that way. And other special projects, some of the Red Bulls sort of projects that have gone on, I don't have unlimited resources or even that size of resource to do those things either. Halo at Everest has been going since 2008, 2009, where you've been able to go and jump there from a helicopter from 23,000 feet, but you're landing at very high altitudes, sometimes as high as 17,000 feet. If any of you have ever jumped in a sort of higher altitude, say even just 2,000 feet high, you'll know that your landings are that much faster. Even with big canopies, I didn't want to do that either. And that's quite an expensive option as well, but it happens every year. This year, I think there was one provider, but there's been multiple providers each year. Denmark has had a halo boogie. See, Mark's down there as well. I met quite a few people in Denmark last year doing that. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. Since 2016, they've done 5 or 6 halo boogies, where you can jump out of a normal Cessna from 25,000 feet with an oxygen system. What else do we have? Yes, the West Coast. So 25. Why not go to Denmark and do it? Well, I want to do something higher than 25. I had in my mind 30,000 feet. Don't ask me where that figure came from, but that was what I had in my mind. And I reached out to an organisation called Skydiving. They were in California. And if you look at the small print, it says sometimes you might not get 30,000 feet, depending on aircraft, air traffic control or weather conditions. And I went backwards and forwards a bit, didn't get any dates. COVID came along, COVID went, came back to them, still no dates. And then West Tennessee popped up on my search engine with the bold claim that they will give you or provide an experience of a jump higher than anywhere else in the world. So massive price. So okay, pick up the phone, speak to them. Always recommend you pick up the phone and speak to people. Don't just rely on emails, actually speak to people. Looked at the aircraft, looked on flight radar, 24. Has this aircraft actually been to 41,000 feet? It had. So I thought, okay, this is good. Find out more information. In the end, there were a few dates. One was the 1st of July. It's February 23 when I was looking at this. So I had my schedule, I had my result with a certain level of quality, come back, and also I had a cost as well, and the level of effort that I would have to go through to actually make this jump. So the environment that we're going to be in, hypoxia is going to be our biggest issue, or one of our biggest issues. And here you've got 10 to 20 seconds of time of useful consciousness or effective performance time if your oxygen system fails. Scott mentioned in his presentation in 22, that's why they tell you on an aircraft to put your mask on first before you try and help someone else. Because if you try and help someone else, you won't get enough time to do that yourself. So it's quite extreme. Temperatures. It's very cold up there. I think the day I did the jump was minus 63. There have been minus 75. So we would need to think about how we're going to manage that. Decompression sickness. Very rare to 20,000 feet, rare at 25,000 feet, although you did have a couple of examples from Scott's presentation. You know, it does happen. We were going to be at 41. We would need to pre-breathe oxygen for 60 minutes before we made this jump. Medical, interesting. Some places it differs around the world where you go and do these things. But if you go to, I think the Californian one was, well, we want you to have a class 3 medical when you get here. We've got a doctor that will do that for you. To just signing a statement that says you are fit to do the jump that you are intending to do. And with the West Tennessee one, that was just one paragraph in 2 pages of waiver, which mentioned death in the 8 times in the first half of the page. So, not sure life assurance would actually work on this, but yeah. Landing, corn sweat. So one extreme, cold to heat. July, hot month, West Tennessee, lots of cornfields. Corn is a living, breathing material, whatever you want to call it, and like us, it sweats. So if you land in the middle of a cornfield, you actually have about 10 minutes where you might just die or pass out from humidity. So our training was, if you land in the middle of a cornfield, strip naked. Straight away, take everything off. Perhaps not everything, but take everything off. Or actually, preferably, land on a road. Safer than actually being. And they've actually had instances where people have nearly passed out going into these fields where they've had to cut away and they're going to try and get their canopy back. It's a killer. It's something that I had never ever come across before. So that was a new piece of learning. The equipment. First thing's an aircraft. This beast is a Piper Chan 400 LS aircraft. Only 50 were ever made. The pilot sold his house to buy it. Chuck Yeager, first person speed of sound. He actually set an altitude climb record in this aircraft, or this type of aircraft, 35,000 feet in 16 minutes. It gets to 15,000 feet in less than 5 minutes, and it will take about 30 minutes to get us to 41,000 feet. An absolutely incredible piece of kit. Oxygen systems. Now we enter a sort of another it's always grey area, but there are oxygen systems and there are oxygen systems. There is only one oxygen system that I know of at the moment that has been specifically designed for sports skydivers. For this jump, I wouldn't be using that because I didn't know about it at the time. Most oxygen systems are either surplus or they're ex-military, and therefore they're maintained by aircraft engineers that know their stuff, but you know the sort of maintenance and the sort of looking after them isn't as they were intended and manufactured. Most of them are in fact bailout systems. So they're bailout bottle, belly bottle, and this one I was going to be using had 5 minutes supply of oxygen. And you get your mask, and it is literally a Top Gun type thing. Helmet, put it in, you know, just have one out, make it look really cool. That's really what they are. They're bailout systems. And it will be connected to an aircraft supply of oxygen as well, so there's a manifold to swap you over from one to the other. Clothing, we were given, we ordered at the supplier's expense, not our own. Heated socks, heated vest, heated gloves. In the end, I didn't turn any of them on, and I didn't use the gloves. I used my own sealskin gloves that worked very, very adequately. You also had to think, I'm jumping in the US, and I had to think about my reserve. Because if you're in the US, your reserve, in certain conditions, will need to be packed by a qualified FAA rigger. But it says, you have to read the wording quite carefully, and it says your reserve or harness. My harness is an SWS Fire. So luckily, I didn't have to comply with that. It was okay for me to use my equipment as packed here in the UK. Otherwise, that would have been a bit of a logistical nightmare, because this drop zone didn't have a full-time rigger. We were doing test jump on the Friday and the proper jump on the Saturday. So to get a rigger in to come and repack my reserve for me would have been another thing that we would have had to plan in. So you've got to think about all these things when you're thinking about these projects. AAD. Cypress 2 is what I've got, and I was informed that the slightly older models would have an outdated software that only allowed them up to 25,000 feet. It's not that they would allow them to 25 feet, but there might be a question about whether they would operate from above 25,000 feet. So when I looked at my model number, guess what? It was one of the older ones. Cypress 2 couldn't have been better. Sent off my unit. I got a unit back that's actually a different unit with a year's more date in it, and they updated the software to 65,000 feet. I think that happened within 10 days. They were brilliant. I couldn't sort of fault them at all. Their customer service was excellent in terms of getting that back to me. Altimeters, sort of your audible and your digital. I checked with them to make sure they were okay to 41,000 feet. Camera, if in the extreme colds, some older GoPro models apparently lose their battery life very quickly. So again, I saw that as an opportunity of getting a new GoPro. Also, the other thing that happens with projects, changes happen. So I didn't go out to set a record with this jump. I just wanted to do a jump from high altitude. But what they said was, actually, we're going to have an FAA judge come along. And there's a couple of other people on the load that are going to go for records. You could actually set a record. So then actually you need to think about what's the procedure for that. Well, actually, you have to notify British Skydiving, who notify the UK aerospace regulatory body. And you have to make sure that you have a sort of a sporting license, an FAI sporting license. So all of these things are little protocol things that have to be done if you want to register this as a record. So again, changes happen. No matter how much you plan, things might come in and they might be a disadvantage or even an advantage to you. But sometimes you take opportunities of these things that come along. You also have lots of stakeholders. Projects have lots of stakeholders. In this case, air traffic control, there's been a really good relationship built with them. And they had a 10-mile diameter radius around the drop zone, up to 41,000 feet, solely for their use from 7 in the morning till 9 in the morning for 2 days in a row. So they built up this agreement and then they book it when they need to or when they're running an operation. Federal Express facility was very, very close to where we would be jumping near Memphis. The pilot, very experienced, a bit of a legend in his own right, actually flew the aircraft for 4 hours, an unpressurized aircraft for 4 hours with an FAA examiner at 41,000 feet with oxygen to test the systems and the procedures. Your aircraft engineer looks after the aircraft as well as the O2. And he also put in place an air conditioning unit because we were going to be stuck in the plane for an hour, pre-breathing, and it was going to get hot and humid. So he actually built an air conditioning unit to blow cool air into the aircraft as well. People that were going to dispatch us, Halo operators, Ground staff are going to kit us up and look after us. My fellow jumpers, 6 of us were going to be jumping. There's a maximum of 6 for this jump. FAO judge, and obviously understanding how that works. And family and friends. Mine were thousands miles away across the other side of the pond, but also there were people accompanying some of the other jumpers as well. Training and rehearsal. Let's get used to the kit. Helmet, the masks, clicking it in, your manifold, understanding your belly bottle, your bailout bottle. And also we had a sort of what we call a Fitbit device, if you like, and it had a finger ring on it, which was connected to the device, and that would then, through Bluetooth, actually project your oxygen saturation of your blood oxygen saturation, as well as your heart rate and also your motion, the amount of movement that you were doing. Very useful piece of kit, and it could produce lots of these. We didn't see that in the plane, but they put iPads up in the plane with those just 3 basic measures, and you could see with alarms when you were actually having issues or if you had issues. So it was a good way of monitoring. You need to get used to the O2 system, and we sort of had some classroom training around it, and then we all practiced it, being in the mask, breathing pressurized gas. If you haven't breathed pressurized gas, again, it might be unfamiliar to you, and I found it very unfamiliar. I actually felt my brain thinking, how am I breathing out? I've got to breathe out, because it's such a rate of flow of oxygen coming in. So you need to, you're sort of experiencing things that are new to you. And that was one big one for me, was actually breathing pressurized gas. And I'm thinking, could I do that for 2.5, 3 minutes in free fall? So I practiced it and I practiced it. But we got used to those systems as well. Exiting. The door on that aircraft is 40% of the size of your normal Cessna doors. So trying to get out on a nice clean exit, protecting your pins at the back and your belly bottle at the front, and with me being slightly bigger than normal, I mean, that was, it was really going to be a stretch to do that. We'll show you a video in a moment. So I just decided I was going to go straight out, and I also decided that I wanted to go out first. In fact, Andy Shaw, a rigger examiner at Dunkerswell, said, "Go out first, Tony." Why is that, Andy? He said, "Because you'll be higher than everyone else." By a few meters or feet, but you were higher. And I actually looked at everyone else, and mine was slightly higher, because the aircraft then just goes into a slightly small descent once it's reached that and you've gone out. We did a familiarization jump, 15,000 feet in less than 5 minutes. Before I knew it, we were at 15,000 feet, and we went out with our full equipment on and our clothing on, and we did a practice jump to just make sure we get familiar with the equipment. Come back, debrief, discuss a few last-minute emergencies. What happens if you have a main come out outside the door at 41,000 feet with 5 minutes of oxygen? What happens if you have a reserve come out outside the door at 41,000 feet? Things like that we needed to discuss, and there were some options, and I'm not saying those options were pleasant, but there were some options that we needed to talk about. Yeah, it's a risk. You are taking some risk, but it is calculated. Day of the jump itself, very early start. 2 a.m. get up in the hotel, 3 a.m. out, 4 a.m. at the drop zone, and then 2 hours to kit up, get on board, and then 60 minutes of breathing so that we could take off for 7 o'clock and have that 2-hour window, maximize that 2-hour window to do the jump. As you can imagine, I probably didn't get a lot of sleep that night. But we got there, we did kit up, this final brief, still dark outside. It was very quiet, it was very subdued. We weren't all high-fiving it, and it was very thoughtful because of the jump that we were just about to make. We get in, we start pre-breathing, and I thought this would be one of the worst parts of the jump, was to sit in an aircraft, tubes everywhere, free breathing for 60 minutes. So I took a book along. It's Harry Potter. So I just read Harry Potter just before my 41,000-foot jump. And before I knew it, I could hear Mike on the radio getting clearance, and then the engines wound up, and we taxied out the hangar, straight onto the taxiway, and we were taking off. The ascent was, I think it was about 35 minutes before we were running in. Got a 4-minute warning. There was an aircraft that got in the way, and there was a pilot that couldn't believe that he was flying at 35,000 feet, that an aircraft operator, sorry, a skydiving operation was about to happen 41,000 feet. So they had to be cleared out the way. There was a slight delay, but then we were ready to exit. And I think my biggest two memories of exit were, one, there was a small layer of ice on the carpet by the door. And then when the door came off and it was stowed, just these ice particles in the cabin. Just like suddenly it was like a decompression event, although it wasn't. But it's just these ice crystals, particles everywhere. And I was the first one out. Now, I did think I could do a real cool, sexy video, like Dane's just done with his, all that music and that, making it look really cool and have really stable exits and like people, and I thought, actually, no, the best way of really showing this is to show the raw footage. Yes, you can get together. I think 3 of us did solos. One was a wingsuiter. And then the other 3 sort of did a formation. I think they set a record of the highest 3-way formation. But what you see here is the load operator. He doesn't have his glove off all the way up, by the way, but he's just turning on my bailout bottle. I'm getting double amount of pressure, so I've now got this waterboard effect with 2 lots of pressure, one from the aircraft supply, and then one coming up from the oxygen bottle, and I can't breathe out. You get double and you physically couldn't breathe out, but that's a good sign. Why is it a good sign? I know that it's happening. I know that I'm getting that other bottle supply. And then what he's going to do is disconnect this, and then I'm going to be invited to exit, but no invitation was needed. By this time, I'm actually wanting to get out, and I'm really glad that I went first. I really wanted to sort of get on with this, with this experience. So apart from the nice unstable exit, what you would also notice, your brain, is that there are some contrails that have come out of the aircraft. You don't often get to see that. It took me about 2,000 feet to get stable. And at the first part of the jump, I'm traveling about 250 miles an hour in terms of free falling. I then want to just make sure that I can maneuver and move my body and things feel like they would in a normal skydive. And I'm starting to look at my sealskin gloves, perfectly adequate for me. Starting to look at my altimeter. I also have a sort of an analog altimeter on my other wrist, completely useless. It goes around a couple of times, and you can't really understand where you are with it. So I'm just concentrating with the digital. I really usually do wear 2, and it was quite a good thing to carry on. So, you getting bored yet? No idea where the drop zone is. We'll deal with that later. And as I'm getting lower, I'm feeling happier, because I'm getting out of that extreme environment, and I just keep on thinking, the lower I get, the safer I get. The lower I get, the safer I get. My goggles have frozen up above here. I can see out of a third of them. Always wear double layered goggles. Otherwise you can get this condensation and frost buildup. But yeah, this is just extraordinary. It's just absolutely brilliant. When I get to about 12,000 feet, I actually fall through. So we're at 15, yeah, we're just coming up to 15 now. So we're still above where we normally jump from. But as we come through this 12,000 feet layer, I'm encompassed with this warmth. So you just go through this really warm layer, and you're encompassed into the warmth at 12,000 feet and lower. So we're about 12,000 feet now. And then it swaps from okay, I'm in the safe zone. Now it's, I don't want this ever to end. I just want to carry on doing this. This is really, really cool. All I'm doing is falling and falling. But at some point, we do have to sort of recognise that gravity is working against us, and at some point we're going to open our canopy. And at about, I think, 5,500, 6,000 feet, I go in for a pull. I'll do a practice pull. And 2.5 minutes in free fall. So that's what 41,000 foot jump looks like. So, Mike's done a great job. We're over the drop zone. Absolutely underneath my feet. Normal landing. I think I did manage to cut someone up, I was told afterwards. I think when I got off, one of the local local jump club members came up and said, "Do you realise you just cut up?" And I'm like, "Well, I didn't mean to." And, but yeah, no, I think I did cut someone up. But landed, no problem. Sort of high fives, conversations like, "That was insane." Things like that happening. The FAI judge comes over and takes our fly sight devices off, and he disappears into a corner and sort of processes the data. He has to send it off to another FAI judge to validate the data, and then he can come back out. We're packing it by this, we're packed, we've done our logbooks, we've done all these things. And then he's going to come out and he sort of talks to us about what we've actually done and achieved. And for me, it was a new European record. Even though there are Europeans that have jumped higher, they were going for world records. 43,264 feet, which is a GPS measure. I prefer that than 41, so funnily enough. And a distance of fall without a drogue, 11,000 meters or 37,500 feet. I checked yesterday, it was still a record. Jithan set an Asian record, and the only person you don't see in there is the wingsuiter. Any wingsuiters in the room? Okay, I thought you'd all be in the other room, guys, but thank you for coming in here. He did 10 kilometers. He did 10 kilometers. I've forgotten how many minutes he was in the air, but it was a very long time, and it took him 2.5, 3 hours to get back to the drop zone. In fact, I think he took more risks than anyone, because he was landing in someone's backyard in a state that has very liberal gun laws. So I think he was taking more of a risk than any of us. But he did eventually come back. We then sort of normality sort of applies. It's a Saturday, people are doing it's a regular drop zone, and we're invited to do a 15,000 foot jump from a beach. No thanks. I'm just going to absorb this and just just take that experience in. I think everyone declined that, apart from the sort of people that are instructors with the club. And eventually we sort of say our goodbyes, and we head off back to our hotels or wherever it is that we're going. And I've still got 2 more days in the States because we had a backup day and then had an extra day for travel. So I do some social media stuff. I write an article for LinkedIn, which I'll give you a link to at the end, for my work purposes, and just sorting out video bits and pieces. And yeah, it starts to sort of think, well, okay, withdrawal symptoms are now applying. I think half the thing is I've been an hour and a half plus on pure oxygen, and that lasts for weeks. No aches and pains. I'm feeling really good. You shouldn't breathe pure oxygen for long periods of time, but actually it's got a really, really good effect as well. Post-jump, I go down to Dunkerswell and I tell my story. I write an article for the British Skydiving magazine. And I'll do a jump from 15,000 feet at Dunkerswell. It's like a hop and a pop, 15,000 feet. It's hop and a pop. And I'm starting to think, is this really, I'm getting to my late 50s, is this the end of my skydiving career? I've done what I really wanted to do. I've come back, I had 9 years back. And then I think, well, actually, Denmark's not very far away. It's a couple of hour flight. I can go following year, sort of try and sell it to Jax that it's like holiday. We can go on holiday, She said, yeah, okay, we'll go. And then she bails anyway, so she knows what it's going to be like. She's going to sit in a hotel room on her own while I'm actually doing skydiving all the time, which probably was the case, wasn't it, Mark? I think that's all we were doing was skydiving. And I did 4 halo jumps with a different system, 25,000 feet out of a Cessna. I did 2 halo jumps in a day with a completely different system. And this system is the one that's specifically designed for sports skydiving. There is no bailout bottle at the front here. It's all neatly put on the sides. So I did 4 there, and I thought, that's great. And I had positioned this 41,000 foot jump as my once-in-a-lifetime experience, darling, you know, my once. And then I came up with, sorry, I'll come on to that in a moment. What I liked about the Denmark thing was the procedure, the formality, the checks. So when we're kitting up, we had multiple checks by so independent checkers, where we got initially checked out, when we were then cross-checked by someone. We stood at the flight line, we were checked again. We then came to the aircraft, we were checked again. We got on board, we were checked again. So all the formality and the procedures of checking out equipment and its operation was really important. And then climbing to altitude was really check and check and check again. Cognitive exercises. What do I mean by cognitive exercises? If someone holds up 2 fingers, you have to process that information. You're expected to come back with 2 + 1. So you hold up 3. So we're looking for signs of hypoxia. We're also looking for signs of decompression as well, and just making sure that everyone's okay. But I really like this rigor. I'm not saying that we didn't have that with the 41,000 foot jump, but this was very, very formal and very thorough. I'm not saying this didn't happen, but this was really a nice way of doing it. It was very professional. Again, the other one was very professional, but this was I don't know, it was just disciplined, very disciplined. And then I said to my wife, actually, there's a second in a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity I like to do, and that's jump. I always wanted to jump down the face of particularly down the face, but in front of the north face of the Eiger in the Alps. Unfortunately, they don't do that anymore, but this outfit at Denmark, they were actually do some jumps from helicopters, and there's only 3 of you that can be in the helicopter going to 23,000 feet, but they were doing ones in front of Mont Blanc. So in October last year, I went and did that. I did 3 jumps, one at 20,500, one at 21,500. That was the highest the helicopter could get to. So the last one was in front of Mont Blanc, or above Mont Blanc and then in front of it. And during that, I also did some training to become a certified halo dispatcher or loadmaster for this particular system. So I had 3 days out in the Alps, which I have to say was on par with the 41,000 foot jump. It was a really, really nice experience and a nice few days. So, absence of a belly bottle, sort of oxygen system, sort of tube goes underneath into the accumulator on one side, and there's a bottle on the other side with a tube that comes across on your chest strap. Very unobtrusive. Absolutely minimal risk, if not no risk, of things getting tangled. It's very, very, very slick. I'm probably looking at that just as well. Didn't have a belly bottle because my belly's a lot bigger than it is now. But there's Mont Blanc in the background, just positioning so that we actually get a nice sort of picture of Mont Blanc. There we go. Snap, that's the one. Absolutely beautiful autumn day. Passé is beneath us. Chamonix is a little bit over that way. You see the accumulator on this side, and you see the oxygen bottle on the other side. It's very, very slick. It's specifically designed for sports skydiving. The valley is sucking you down into it. And say just the last, not exactly the last rays of the sun, but a really nice day, a really nice jump to finish the day off on. And again, I think we're about 2,000 feet above sea level, so the jump's a little bit less in terms of free fall, but the ground is definitely getting bigger and the valley's sucking you in, as you can probably see. the ground is looking that much bigger. And then to cap it all off, just as we get underneath canopy, 2 French Air Force Rafale jets come screaming along the valley just in front of us, which is a nice little flyby for us. But yeah, I thought that was a very fitting end to the day. And funny enough, we all saw it, but no one managed to capture it on their cameras. We couldn't find it on the cameras, so it must have been going that fast that we could not see it. But we definitely did see it visually. We all saw it visually. So, really nice. So that was 7 halo jumps, 1 at 41,000, 4 at 25,000, 1 at 20.5, and 1 at 21.5. I'm addicted. It's something that I would like to carry on doing. There are opportunities out there to do it, and I think it's becoming more and more available to us. As Scott said in his presentation, you know, these are more available. We should know the dangers, and I think there's been quite a bit on that, and the preparation is really, really important for us. In fact, what I'd say is treat it like a project. Remember the 7 Ps. I actually learnt more by preparing, well, not more, but I learnt probably as much again from preparing for this presentation by looking at the previous presentations that have been done at this event, to think about, okay, what am I, you know, some of the things that, you know, I sort of picked up was more than I sort of knew before. So you can't do enough research. Even though you think you are, you can't do enough. So I think it's very, very important that we're prepared. Treat it like a project. I like the technical discipline. It is more technical. I think it's the procedure is something I like. The discipline is something that I like. Also, I'd like to say longevity. Our sport has longevity in it. Would I have said back in 1984 that I would do this jump? No. Would I have said when I came back at 50, would I do this? Absolutely no. So, you know, we have lots and lots of disciplines and variety compared to what we did when I first started. So there's lots of things that we can do. It's something that we can stop and start and come back to. And maybe, if it's your thing, maybe give it a go. So, thank you very much. I'll put some links here in terms of if you want to email me afterwards. If we've got time for questions, that's great. If you think of other questions, feel free to email me. I wrote a little, probably saw the Skydive Mag one, but I put a little, same story, but it's done rather from a project perspective in a LinkedIn article if you want to read that. But that's it from me. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much. This is probably going to be the more difficult part.
Thank you, Andy. That was very good. Like most things in life, what was the cost?
Well, I didn't. It's a bit of a story. I didn't actually say to my wife, this is what it's going to cost. I said, are you okay if I do it? And she said yes. And I kept on checking 3 or 4 times, are you okay if I do this? But I didn't say the price. But my son, unbeknownst to me afterwards, actually did go and look up at the cost and told her. And then I think she was not expecting the cost that it was. It's expensive. If you can get 6 people to do it, it's the best thing you're going to be able to do. Go on the website and have a look. I really don't want to say it because it's thousands. It's thousands. Yeah, it's thousands. Yeah, you can look it up. It's there. It's there.
I've got 2 questions.
Please.
So one, you kind of skipped over the canopy ride, but my kind of aversion to even trying it is the amount of kit, and in particular for under canopy. But my other question is, what does Mrs. Eve get as a result of the answer to the first question?
Whatever she likes. Yeah, she did. I did ring her back. It was quite emotional, actually, when I rang her after the jump, because everyone else's family was there, but mine wasn't. So I did actually text and say it's over. And I actually did. Well, I actually got getting emotional now. I actually got a bit emotional over that. And I did say you can now put the life assurance policy away. I'm not sure that would have been any good anyway. I think she's pleased that I'm able to do some things and enjoy something. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question or not. The canopy ride, the one where you could do the cool Tom Cruise thing, like go clip and leave it hanging half it. That one was fine. The other one, it's a harness that goes around your face, so you have to wear that mask all the way down. For me, I'm a slightly big guy, so if I'm down here, it's not as easy, but it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's just something you need to be, try on and see, well, could you think I could do that? But you're on the canopy for what, 5 minutes? So I wouldn't say it's that bad.
Yeah, sorry to be a bit of a Debbie Downer here. I actually think it's hugely irresponsible to advocate jumping at 41,000 feet. Just for context for you, I'm the person that Scott was talking about in his presentations before, and we're chat offline.
Yeah, I remember.
You spoke about the emergency procedures.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what that looks like for having a reserve pin pop at 41,000 feet?
I'm completely honest and open. It was not very good. It was done right at the end of the day. Before we really couldn't bail at that point. Well, we could, as Scott said in his presentation, you can always bail. But the things were either
Well, you can't really bail at 41,000 feet.
No, I meant bail out of the whole situation, the experience.
Yeah.
41,000 feet, if the reserve opening, you are really going to be sort of either pulling down and really sort of bringing your canopy down fast or collapsing. Or people said cut it away and open. Cut it away.
As you stated there, the time of useful consciousness of 41,000 feet is about 10 seconds. It's closer to 8 actually.
Yeah.
And there's no way that you're surviving that, particularly on a bailout system with
5 minutes.
Two people that don't know anything about high altitude parachuting.
Yeah.
One of which is on the job training only.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer in this situation, but for the context of everyone, come to DeLand. If you want to jump at 41,000 feet, I'll pay for 8 hop and pops at $5,000 for you. Like, don't do this. Is the short version.
That's fair enough. What I would definitely say is I think the operations that you have at 25,000 feet are equally as rewarding, and they're much more risk averse. You are not in that extreme, and I completely agree. But it's like any of these. That's why it's extreme altitude. I'm not disagreeing at all. I think you're right. There is 25,000 feet around there for you guys. I think it's something that we can do more of. I think we should be doing more of. And that is definitely within the more risk-adverse area.
I would say that we should be doing less of it.
Okay,
fact.
that's your opinion. I understand. Yeah, I've watched Scott's presentation so many times.
Having been the guy that's been given an hour to live as a result of this activity, I really think it's a poor message to send to people to advocate going to 41,000 feet.
We can agree to disagree, but that's fine.
We're chat offline.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
I know you had oxygen and everything, obviously, but did you notice a difference in cognitive ability when you came out at 41,000 to
If not,
15,000?
it's more because you are breathing oxygen from the ground. I felt really focused and really quite aware of my surroundings. That's not to say that, if things go wrong, that you wouldn't suffer from those. And I think, Scott's presentation, and it's Neil, I think, is it Neil? Yeah, Neil's, completely valid. You are in an extreme environment, and you are relying on other people as well as yourself. But I don't think even you knew you had decompression sickness, I think was the presentation. But you're relying on others as well. So you are in an extreme environment, and I think Neil's point is valid. But that's the choice that we have the right to make, or the opportunity to make. But personally, no, I didn't see any. In fact, I was more aware. Okay, no other. Thank you very much for your time. It's been very nice talking to you. Thank you.